Hello, everybody, and welcome to the new episode of Full Funnel B2B Marketing Podcast. Today, finally, we are chatting with Nick Wentz, VP of Marketing at Clearbit, and thanks a lot for joining us in these overwhelming times. As always, guys, you'll have opportunity to ask your questions live. Feel free to, if you want to join, feel free to leave your question in the Zoom chat, and then I will call you so you can join us live, or I can ask a question on your behalf, so up to you. And today, as promised, we are going to chat about how to build B2B attribution model. Guys at Clearbit nailed the process. I love their framework they use for attribution, for lead scoring. So these are the things that we are going to chat with you today. And first of all, Nick, thanks a lot for joining us. I probably muted you, so let me unmute you. Just a second. Yeah, can you unmute yourself?
There we go. Yeah, it's so great to be here. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah, so as promised, today we are going to chat about attribution. And, there are lots of conversations about how to build the right attribution model in B2B. For example, we have Chris Walter, right, from Refine Labs. He talks a lot about the mistakes B2B companies are making when it comes to B2B attribution. And the most common mistake is basically measuring the last touch, saying like, hey, so the lead came from LinkedIn ad, right, and booked a demo call, and so that's why we need to double down on LinkedIn ads. And he's absolutely right, because if you have long and complex sales cycle, right, and you sell high ticket products, then you have way more steps before they land on your website and fill in the request a demo form, right? So my question, and the first question basically I want to discuss, like how your attribution model looks like, and what do you track, and what's your approach for tracking the entire buying journey?
Yeah, so this is a question that is near and dear to the heart. We have evolved our thinking over time about this, and I think the industry as a whole and a lot of B2B marketing teams have come a long way in the last 5 years, even when it comes to direct attribution and getting marketing a little bit closer to revenue. But even with that progress that's been made, I think tying, to your point, every marketing activity, or especially last touch to revenue, is really challenging and certainly does not tell the full story. So, I've seen this countless times. We're probably guilty of it too, but marketers can burn a ton of energy, a ton of time merging data from disparate systems and tying specific actions to close deals, or weighting certain actions based on their likelihood to result in a future conversion event. And I think the spirit of all of that work is exactly right, but can often lead to mixed results and missteps, and even ill-advised investments in the wrong areas. To your point earlier about LinkedIn, if you decide to focus all of your money and effort on LinkedIn because that was the last touch, you're missing a huge part of what led to that actual conversion. So, and whenever I talk about attribution, I like to bring up this story just because it really resonated with me. But I have a friend who used to work at Slack, and we were talking about a very well-resourced team, and I think they spent a quarter, maybe even 2 quarters, building out this very sophisticated attribution model and system. And at the end of this exercise, they still called it an agreed upon lie. And that is because you can't have full transparency. You can't have a complete view of everything that's going on. And so I think the learning for me there is that when it comes to tying revenue to marketing, it's important to look at trends and the high level things. And so, what I mean by that is, let's take an example of a performance marketer. So a performance marketer can spend all day making micro optimizations, and that's great. But if you do that as a marketing team, I think you're going to have missteps. So instead of doing that, I would recommend looking at things like ratios. So let's say that you are running a webinar or an ebook download. At the end of that event or after a certain period of time, looking at the ratio of qualified versus unqualified leads. Simple as that. So, and better yet, over time, is that ratio improving for you? And that's going to give you an indicator or a signal that you're investing in the right areas. The effort that you're putting into your marketing activities is resulting in attracting the right type of person. So if you want, go ahead if you had a question.
Just wanted to ask one practical question. So what's your definition of qualified lead and unqualified as well?
Yeah. So this is a great question. So as of today, and this has again evolved a lot over time, but we're looking at two things primarily. The first is fit. I think of fit as being the barrier to a salesperson's time. So the second component of that scoring or that qualification would be intent. And these have to be used in tandem. If you are strictly looking at intent, you're going to end up wasting an enormous amount of time because you're just working the squeaky wheels as opposed to the company that is actually a good fit and going to be with you long term instead of churning after a year. And so when it comes to our scoring system, we're looking at things like, are they in B2B? Do they have a pain point that we solve? Is their team large enough to truly get the value out of Clearbit that we want them to and that they need to get? And then we're also looking at technologies used. So, we have these really great integrations, native integrations with tools like Salesforce and Marketo and HubSpot, and that we know that the teams that use those tools have a higher likelihood of converting and staying with us long term. So those are important signals as well. But yeah, happy to talk about the intent piece too. I know that that's definitely a part of this conversation.
Of course. That definitely would be a question about this. One thing that I'm just wondering, so several criteria that you mentioned, they are basically ICP criteria, right? That you can easily track even in your own software, which is, by the way, a fantastic tool for this. But how can you identify what's the value they are looking to get from the product without talking to these people? So basically, do you have a field in your form where you ask this question, or maybe you are sending like progressive profiling emails trying to get this context?
Yeah, so this has also evolved a lot over time. A couple different things. So first, we try to keep our form as simple as possible. And for those of you who don't know, we have a great form shortening product that will allow you to remove all the fields that Clearbit already has data on. And the more fields you remove, the more your conversion rate goes up, the more qualified leads you're going to generate. But that doesn't solve for free form fields. And so we have a free form field that just says, what problem are you trying to solve? And sometimes we get straight answers there. Sometimes we get a jumble of letters, people just trying to get through the form. But that can help inform the conversations, and that can help tell the SDR what solutions that individual might be interested in. And then again, going back to intent, I think I'm going to go back to engagement intent a lot during this conversation, but our attribution system is now at a point where we have a pretty comprehensive view of a customer's journey. So we can understand and tie specific engagements and actions to a lead object. And So you might be able to show, oh, well, this lead has visited our use case for form shortening, our use case landing page for form shortening. And that's not going to tell you with 100% certainty that they're interested in that solution, but it might directionally inform your conversation. Hey, this individual might be interested in this solution. So we also leverage that intent and engagement piece as
is
well.
it possible that you'll share with us that example? I remember that you sent me like one screenshot of that kind of.
Oh, yeah. Let me see if I can dig that up while we talk.
Yeah, that would be absolutely fantastic. And by the way, while you're looking, guys, a question to you, where you are all joining us from, let me know in the Zoom chat. Curious to see where you're all coming from. We have 32 folks online with us. Share with you where, share with us where you're all coming from.
All right, so I actually have a picture that I can share here.
Yeah, just try to share the screen. Edward is coming from UK. Do we have Europeans? Soumya from India, Sanjeev also India, Margaret Toronto, Abby UK, Iris Barcelona, Konstantin, Felice and Budapest, Jordi from Netherlands, Pete Iowa, Sveti India. Nice. So we have quite an international audience today. Thanks a lot for joining us, guys.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, cool. Can you share a screen, please?
Yeah. Let me share it right now.
Shyam, Dubai.
Oh, looks like it's disabled, actually.
Just a second. Try now,
right,
please.
There we go. All right. Am I sharing the right tab?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So this is an example of what a sales rep might have available to them in our Salesforce instance. And so, as you can see, it's fairly good coverage on the pages that have been visited, the emails that have been opened, and the actions that have been taken. So as an example, you see that on 4/8/2021, they submitted a demo request. And then on 4/7/2021, they used our free tool, one of our free tools, the TAM calculator. And so all of this information and all of this context is super important for the sales rep to gain and inform what they're going to talk about and what might be most interesting during an actual sales call or a demo. So this has been really helpful in making sure that they have the right information accessible to them.
And I tracking, so basically page views and forms you are tracking via Clearbit, right? And email clicks. So do you have a native integration, or what's the way you're tracking this?
Yeah, so it's a combination of our Clearbit tag, but we also are heavy users of Segment for tracking these events and storing these events. Yeah.
Cool.
And yeah.
And the practical question, so basically these are insights that are related to the bottom of the funnel and potentially middle of the funnel interactions, right, for the prospect. Do you track somewhere potentially when you win a deal, right, when you have a new customer during the onboarding process? Do you somehow collect the data about their top of the funnel research, or basically any research that you can track with the platform?
Yeah, so this is can be inherently difficult, right, for marketers to do, especially in B2B. B2C, it's much easier. But we've gotten pretty good at being able to tie a closed customer's domain to leads that exist in the database as well, and being able to kind of join those two data sets to get a full picture of the events that took place to close that customer. And so as we all know, buying committees and buying groups are really important in B2B. And each one of those individuals in that buying group has a unique journey and has a unique interaction and an experience with a product. And so it can be very helpful to line all of those up to understand what actions took place amongst the buying group and not just the end user or the end buyer. So yeah, and we've come a long way with that. It hasn't always been that clear, for sure.
It's evolution, of course, like
evolution and
everything in marketing.
Yeah, we're trying to get a little bit better.
Yeah, that's always takes some time. So practical question about the lead score, and I know that you guys developed quite good and sophisticated model for lead scoring, and basically this is a talk that you are going to share with us during our full funnel summit last week of March, right? I would like just touch that point. So what's your approach to lead scoring, right? Because again, I'm referring to the conversations I'm seeing on LinkedIn quite often. Again, Chris Walker, right? He says like, that's absolutely incorrect to like apply some scores, numbers that if I click the link in newsletter or open newsletter, it means that I'm ready to buy, right? Which I absolutely agree. So the truth, if I'm subscribed, let's say, to Clearbit newsletter and I'm reading the guides that you're sending to me, it doesn't mean that I'm ready to buy the product, right? So what's your approach to scoring the leads, and so what are the most common mistakes you're also seeing B2B companies are making when it comes to scoring?
Yeah, so when it comes to the actual scoring of our leads, we actually, for those of you who don't know the company or might not use it, we use MadKudu for the actual scoring piece. And they use machine learning to identify the leads based on firmographics, B2B attributes, and then tying that to your customer base. So you actually create this kind of likelihood to purchase model, this propensity model. And I believe the last time I checked, it was at 96 or 95% confidence, meaning they're able to identify an incoming lead and understand that lead or that profile is similar to our closed won customers already. And so that's really helpful. Oh, did I miss a question in there?
Yes, I just
MadKudu. Yeah. MadKudu. So we've used MadKudu for the last 2 years or so, and that model improves over time because the more data you feed it, the more accurate it becomes. But I think when it comes back to tying marketing to revenue and looking at attribution as a whole, there's a few other things that we like to use as directional markers or even proxy metrics. Helpful to go into those as well, and then I can talk about our direct attribution model as well. But I think that just talking about direct attribution it's an important piece, but it's something that marketers can easily get wrong. If you're just looking at a converting touch, for instance, that's not going to tell the whole story. So if you don't mind, let me just touch on these two other points.
Absolutely.
So I think going back to our original conversation, the first thing we talked about was the ratio of qualified leads to unqualified leads. And so understanding that mix will help inform your investments. If you understand that, hey, this type of webinar, this type of ebook, or this report are generating the right leads for your sales team, you know to invest more there because you're attracting the right audience. I think to take that one step further is to look at qualified traffic. Not to promote Clearbit again, but using Reveal or any reverse IP technology, there's plenty on the market. You can understand where your visitors are coming from and whether they meet your target market or your ICP definition. And so, the contextual data that you get through GA, Google Analytics, whether it's referral source, location, or browser, that's all great, but it does not explain quality. So there needs to be some quality measure in there. And once you de-anonymize your site traffic, you can see which accounts are visiting and then begin to understand what marketing activities and channels and even messaging drove those accounts to your site. And so then you can leverage those insights and inform, future investments. I think like the continuation of that, or the next step of that, is segmentation too. B2B marketers love their segmentation, and it's an important piece of everyone's strategy. So what are the target segments that you have, and what are those target segments viewing on your website or your other web properties? Which sources or channels were most successful or most effective in driving those target segments to the key pages that you care about? And also, like, what solutions are those target segments interested in? It's very possible that you have a suite of products, and you have multiple target segments, and each one might fit into a different product or a different solution in a different way. So I think that measuring the ratio of qualified leads, looking at where qualified traffic is coming from, are both important things that should inform your investments. One other signal that we like to use is, and this is pure qualitative feedback, but it's having conversations with our sales reps and our customer success managers. What are those conversations with customers looking like? What are the friction points? Where those conversations get held up? How informed are the leads and prospects that come in and have those conversations? That can tell us a lot about how well we're doing our job. And yeah, I think there's one other I'll comment on, and I think it's probably my favorite, and the one that gets the team most excited. And that's when a prospect comes in and they ask, I saw this like marketing campaign, or I saw this personalization on your website, or how did you do that? Like, tell me how to do that. And that leads to a conversation with our team. And we love having those conversations with prospects to explain how we're doing certain things and to learn from each other. I think that's a great qualitative signal of whether or not we are pushing work out into the world that resonates with our target audience.
Absolutely. And also I love that you touched that point about measuring the quality of the traffic, because that's actually the part of account-based marketing, right? If you are going to, especially if you are selling high-ticket product, right? Or if you are prospecting enterprise companies, that's mandatory, because you can't set up an AF funnel, right? But like invest heavily in Google ads and LinkedIn ads and expect that people will come and just pay from the wallet for let's say 10K, 50K, whatever, right? For your product, no chance. So you need to do kind of awareness, right? That you mentioned, also promoting content, thought leadership, etc. Maybe some also the reports, whatever you have, unique insights. And then measure the traffic, because you can set up UTM metrics and easily see if they came from the specific campaign. And that's actually a fantastic signal in account-based marketing if you have that account engagement. So thanks a lot for sharing this. I see a question from Jonathan. Go ahead, please. Hey, Jonathan, go ahead, please. Yeah, just unmute yourself.
There we go. Yeah, I had my dog barking, so I went on mute again. What's going on, guys? Hey, yeah, I think this might be beneficial to have a conversation about, and I think you kind of alluded to it a little bit, Nick. But we work with a lot of B2B SaaS companies, and I think the conversation always ends up going towards, how much revenue did this specific channel generate for us? And I'm talking specifically from a paid perspective. So it's like you look at LinkedIn or Facebook, we want to know how much revenue did this given channel give us? And I know that, Andre especially, I know is probably in agreement with this to an extent. Curious your thoughts as well on how you guys think about it at Clearbit. But given that we all know that the buyer's journey isn't linear, and you just even showed us a really interesting report there where there's multiple different touch points across the journey, right? That they didn't just see your LinkedIn ad, but they might have saw an email from your SDR. They might have gone and downloaded a piece of content from your website, et cetera, et cetera. So I think where a lot of people get stuck, especially early stage SaaS companies that we work with, is that they start attributing everything usually to the last touch or first touch a lot of times. And they just say, hey, if it didn't, came from LinkedIn and this was the last touch, we're going to attribute that all revenue to that. And ultimately what happens when you start treating every paid channel, especially when you start ungating and running other types of strategies in those channels, is that you start to say, well, wait a minute, like this doesn't even make sense. Why are we spending money on this channel when we're not getting the last touch attribution conversions off that channel? But wait a minute, when we look at the aggregate, we seem to be driving more inbound demo requests and more inbound pipelines. So it's kind of the constant struggle of, how do you really, think about attribution from a channel by channel perspective? And is it right to think about it that way? And I'm curious how you guys think about it at Clearbit. I know we've had this conversation all the time with SaaS companies that are kind of struggling with this idea that it's not just like LinkedIn's bad and not doing a good job. LinkedIn is a channel for consumption of content, for getting out a message, et cetera. And yes, there are some goals and campaigns that may be driven to get leads out of the specific channel that are more attributable, but there's also other goals and other campaigns. But I'll stop myself there just to kind of give a little more context. But any thoughts you have on that, or you guys jostle that at Clearbit quite a bit?
Yeah, so great question. I mean, this comes up just all the time in conversation, and I think there's a few facets of this. I'd go back to these directional markers and these qualitative signals. I think those are really important pieces to understanding the effect that your marketing has as a whole. Now, when you start getting into the conversation with finance and the executive team, their appetite for something a little bit more directly tied to conversion events is certainly greater. And so you need to be able to have informed conversations about that. So that screenshot that I showed, and you already alluded to this, but being able to tie certain events or certain channels to different stages of the customer lifecycle is hugely important. And I think this is the most effective way to get the most accurate picture. So at Clearbit, we know that downloading an ebook is a really important step in the customer lifecycle, but it's not a last touch converting event. It's not the event that is going to lead to a sales conversation necessarily. But we do know that there are certain webinar topics that are a little lower in the funnel that do, and that are really prime prospects to have good sales conversations. And so when it comes to channels, I would think about it in a similar way, but the goal of those channels has to be awareness. It has to be having a conversation with your market that leads to a future event. And I think it's really dangerous to start thinking about these channels, as I think we're all talking about, Andre and you, Jonathan, tying those channels to a final event. This is the event that culminated and ended up turning into actual revenue. Is just a tough conversation to have. And the truth is, a lot of executive teams, a lot of finance teams expect that. And so I think there's a certain level of managing up, expectation setting that has to be set before you start employing these paid strategies that cost a lot of money. There has to be an agreement that we're not looking for last touch here. We're using paid to have a conversation with our market and build awareness about our brand and the things that we solve. So not a perfect answer, right? But that's how we've thought about it at Clearbit.
No, it's the same way that we communicated. I just wanted to kind of voice it to the whole audience, because I think most will probably get some value from what you just said right there, because it is difficult. And I think it's certainly the easier path to look at a paid channel and just say, it's black and white. LinkedIn says we've got this many conversions, and based on the UTMs we're using, the CRM says this, and here's our revenue. And not go any further and think that there was anything else part of it. So it gets really complex for people when you're like, well, wait, there were all these other touch points that are part of the journey. And you can prove that with a whole number of ways, the ways you guys are doing it currently, other third-party attribution software, and frankly, just using intuition, right? And understanding think about the way that you buy, right? I mean, did you just literally see that one ad convert and then buy? There's probably a handful of people like that, but most people probably interacted with a number of different places on your website, content, but podcast, webinars, whatever it may be. So I think it's just important that everyone, not just isolate a single channel out like LinkedIn or Facebook and think about it exactly the way you just said it. Like there's different goals for those channels. If it's a webinar push and you're trying to get registrations, maybe you look at that very linearly and you say, all right, how many registrations do I get specifically from that channel? If it's more awareness, it's ungated content, it's a blog, it's something valuable, but you're not necessarily trying to get a conversion out of it immediately. You need to measure that channel differently accordingly. So.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And something that we made this change a year or so ago, but based on the goals that we had, we were really focused on direct response campaigns. And so looking for those conversion events off of single touches. And it's probably been more than a year. I think COVID has warped my perception of time. And that strategy of looking for those direct responses or those direct conversions off of a specific channel or specific offer just is a losing game. Like you're gonna run out of latent demand in the market. There's going to be certain people that are looking for that exact solution at the exact right time, but the best strategy that we've employed at Clearbit has just been saying, look, you might not be interested now. 99% of the market might not be interested now, but they might next month, they might 6 months from now. It's our job as marketers to make sure that we're having a consistent and ongoing conversation with them and providing value to them along their customer life cycle, even before they ever convert into a webinar lead or an ebook download. That work happens well beyond any conversion event. And so what we started doing is we have inbound leads, which are strictly contact requests. These are the highest intent leads. And then anything related to content. So could be an event attendee, could be a webinar attendee, could be an ebook download, could be a free tool user. These are all categorized as marketing engaged leads. We nicknamed them MELs. MELs are near and dear to our hearts. And this is kind of the most crucial indicator for us is how effective are we at driving engagement from this group? Because we know that this group is the group that is going to need our solutions eventually. And so we want to stay top of mind for that group. And so I think delineating between those two types of leads is really important. And I would love to talk about personalization and segmentation and all that eventually, but that it's really important to treat those two groups distinctly because your conversations are going to be so much different with each of those based on their level of intent. So anyway, we'll stop talking for a little bit.
Good stuff. I could go back and forth too, but I'll give it back to Andre to get.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jonathan. Fantastic questions. Thanks a lot for joining the discussion. Yeah. And definitely, I want to touch that point about activating these marketing engaged leads. But before we'll dive deeply, quick announcement, guys. I dropped a link in a Zoom chat to our podcast channel on Spotify. So Spotify recently released a feature that you can vote for our show. So if you like the conversation and if you like the podcast, please don't mind and give us 5 stars. And by the way, also potentially most of you know that last week of March, we are going to host full funnel B2B marketing summit, the 3rd edition already, and Nick would be among our keynote speakers. So talking about the modern lead scoring and qualification model, so you guys can sign up for his session directly without signing up to the summit. The link is in a Zoom chat, and also if you are listening to the recording, right, so you'll find the links in a podcast episode description. So let's touch that part about activating marketing engaged leads. So what's your approach here?
Did you say activate them?
Yeah. So
Yep. So this is where so Julie on our team, she's our in-house data scientist, and she has created an activity score. And so this is our way of monitoring a marketing engaged leads intent. And so, we have found with a lot of trial and error that sending a lead to sales who has engaged with one piece of marketing collateral is typically a losing game. You might get lucky from time to time, but your conversion rates just are not high enough, or at least our conversion rates are not high enough to warrant that sales investment quite yet. And so we like to look at, I don't exactly know what the threshold is, but after a certain amount of time, you see this activity score rise. And it's based on all the interactions across all of our properties and all of our marketing materials. And so the more engaged that lead becomes, the more likely they are to convert. And I think there's an important point here in that it's really tempting for data-driven marketers and performance marketers to gather all of these intent signals and try to find statistical significance and run regressions and do all this stuff. And maybe that's great, but I think 9 times out of 10, it can be a little bit of a wasted effort. I think my recommendation, at least when starting out, to leverage intent in how you treat marketing engaged leads or leads of any kind, is a more simpler model. So what we ended up doing is categorizing interactions or engagement into 2 buckets: high intent, low intent. And you can use a simple framework like ICE or something to prioritize how high an action is on the intent scale. So an example, you have a contact request is a high intent. So that would immediately get sent to sales, obviously. And then you have other actions like downloading an ebook, which is low intent. And so once you have enough low intent actions, it's usually indicative of someone who is more engaged or more likely to buy or more likely to be in an appropriate place to have a sales conversation. And so we use that activity score to prioritize which leads we are sending to sales to work. Yeah, does that answer your question? Happy to elaborate too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm also wondering if you can provide like some practical examples. Basically, I'm just practically thinking, like, do you send this, let's say, half engaged leads, right, to sales, and what's the next step? So basically, do they reach out and, I don't know, provide additional materials or ask the feedback about the content, or basically just pitch the product or pitch the demo call, right?
This is a great question. So early on, we made the mistake of saying, look, they're engaged. Let's have sales reach out and try to pitch them. And this is just a bad experience for everyone. This is a bad experience for the customer. This is a bad experience for the sales rep. Like, no one's necessarily winning here. And so what we've ended up doing is making the sales conversation for these marketing engaged leads a little bit more of a consultant style approach. So instead of hard pitching a product, it's, hey, I noticed that you were interested in this webinar about lead scoring. I also noticed that you downloaded our book about lead scoring and routing. It sounds like this might be a subject that's top of mind for you. And I'm wondering if there's anything that we can do to help you and your team, discover the right solution around that topic. And so it's much more consultative than a hard sale.
Nice. And for those, so that's for this half engaged, and for those who, let's say, have low engagement, right? Also, this question came from Patrick. So what are your strategies to nurture and like activating this low engagement leads?
Yeah, so we we have several tactics for this, and the first is email, and so we want to make sure that our emails are as personalized as possible and tailored to that individual's interests. And some of those are going to be assumptions. Without talking to someone, you just can't know for certain. But you can use signals like they downloaded a ebook about lead scoring to inform how you might have a conversation with that individual. And you don't want, I think it's really important not to be overly prescriptive here. It's very possible that that is only one component that they're interested in. And so you don't want to limit yourselves by any means, but you can use that data point to inform how you engage with the user. And so we might make sure to prioritize that lead for content that is related. And so that could be sending them another related ebook or a report or a webinar that is based on that same topic. Just making sure that we're being consistent with our messaging and trying to tailor our communications with those leads to what they might be interested in. And then, another example of this is in-app messaging or on-site banners. So if you're on the form shortening solutions page, we might highlight our a customer testimonial about form shortening. And so we just want to make sure that a user's or a lead's experience is as relevant as possible. And we do that through a number of different channels. And it really, even on advertising, we try to do that. So if someone is visiting that form shortening use case page, let's retarget them with form shortening messaging. And so just trying to make sure that we're being consistent.
Yeah, and these additional touches, aside from on-site personalization, so these additional touches, let's say email touches. So I assume these are automated sequences, right? So you send automated like emails for different segments.
Yeah, most of these are going to be automated. There are the manual sends when we have upcoming events. Mm-hmm. And so we'll make sure that the folks who have expressed interest in the topics that we're covering are included in those emails. But most of it will be automated based on previous engagements.
Cool. So I have a last question to wrap this conversation up. But before I will ask, let me ask you folks, how did you like this session? Was it insightful? Did you learn something new? Just share with us in the Zoom chat. Curious to hear your feedback. And while you're typing, my question basically is how your marketing report looks like. So you mentioned some of the metrics like marketing engaged leads, right? What else do you have in your report? And basically, how do you track or how do you show the marketing sourced pipeline?
Yeah, great question. So I'll defer back to that screenshot I shared. So the way that our attribution system model is set up today, we're able to look at the converting touch to lead, the converting touch to MQL, the converting touch to SQL. And to our points earlier, you don't want to rely on one of those. You want to look at the entire picture. But from that data, we're able to ascertain where revenue is coming from by looking at various converting touches to different stages of the customer lifecycle. And so, this has to be a dynamic, like fluid conversation. You're not just going to say, okay, converting touch to SQL, that's all we're going to look at. You have to look at each of those touch points. But as a marketing team that's gold on pipeline and pipeline coverage, we do have to look at at a company level at what are the touch points that are leading to that pipeline. And then on our own team, we might be looking at the awareness side of things. We might be looking at higher in the funnel metrics. But when it comes to the actual pipeline, we want to say, okay, well, we know that these offers or these tools or these marketing materials are the thing that is leading to that final touch. That's a separate conversation than what we're talking about earlier, because that is specific to pipeline, and then that's kind of the company level discussion. And then there's a secondary discussion that happens on the marketing team about the awareness side.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much. So the insights were brilliant. I love how you nailed this attribution topic and scoring as well. And I'm super pumped for the upcoming session. I mean, for
Yeah.
your session about lead scoring. Really looking to learn more from you. And of course, thank you guys for joining us. Again, you know how I love our international community, seeing people from North America, Europe, Asia. Unfortunately, we don't have Australians here because of time zone, but anyhow, so
we'll get them next time.
Yeah. Thank you so much, guys, again for joining us. I will send you an email with the recording so you can sign up for Nick's session. You'll get a link to our Spotify podcast channel. And thanks a lot for your brilliant questions. See you next Thursday. As always, Nick, thanks a lot, mate, for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, everything. Thank you.
Yeah. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye all.